All Souls Unitarian Universalist Church, building community, inspiring growth, creating change. Here in the heart of Kansas City, we come together to create this hour of shared reflection so that we might be renewed in courage for these times and inspired to lives of greater dignity, higher purpose, deeper generosity, and more effective action. If you are new to Unitarian Universalism or to our congregation, we want to get to know you and share part of your journey. If this place is already your spiritual home, welcome once more. We need one another, and it is good to be together again. Because we care for one another's safety, our congregation is gathering online during this long season of coronavirus pandemic. Nevertheless, through the gifts of technology, we continue to celebrate community and connections as we lean into the values of justice, compassion, and reason. Together, we learn the love that has the power to overcome both loneliness in the heart and oppression in the world. Welcome to our service this morning. May the words and music and images that we offer today nourish our best selves, calling forth abundant wisdom and love. Arise, our souls, all arise. Good morning, and welcome to this online gathering of All Souls Unitarian Universalist Church of Kansas City on May 16th, 2021. This morning's service precedes our annual congregational meeting, which will convene this afternoon at 1 o'clock to elect our lay leadership team for the coming program year and to honor those who have served us during the past year and years. Ours is a covenant community of memory and promise, bound together by our shared commitment to respect and care for one another as we seek to grow in wisdom and to change the world for the better. This morning, I am pleased to welcome to our virtual pulpit our own member, John Maher. John has been an active UU for many years. He and his wife, Peg, have participated in many facets of our church's life. And John has reflected deeply on the question of what it means to covenant together and how our congregational covenant calls us to our best lives as individuals and as a community. I thank him for being willing to share the fruit of that pondering with us this morning.
Good morning. We gather this morning on the cusp of good things about to happen. Happy events we've been hoping for, some inevitable, some we've earned. Spring is here. We're almost out of the COVID woods. Not quite, but we can peer through the remaining barriers and see the clear space ahead, where soon we'll be able to gather again, face to face, unmasked and undistanced. We're getting some new patio furniture and can gather there at first. There's talk of a summer social event outdoors, maybe on the patio or on the Simpson House grounds. Throughout the city and the country, there are easing protocols and restrictions, and there's the relief at last of having a government that's trying to help. The natural reaction is excited anticipation. There's a good case to be made that this might be an appropriate moment to pause and gratefully reflect on the past year or so, all that we've come through, how we've found our ways to be together through it all, and how we may find out that we've strengthened our bond during this time. But then let's go ahead with the excited anticipation.
We kindle our chalice this morning with excited anticipation of being together again on our beautiful grounds this summer, and also of being in our familiar building when the new program year begins in September. We also offer our deep thanks to everyone whose help and leadership has made it possible for us to persist as a community through the challenges of this pandemic year. Gratitude to our Board of Trustees, our technology volunteers, our staff, and everyone who has made possible our online gatherings and classes for young and old, our Sunday Plus meals and caring connections, the ongoing upkeep of our building and our grounds, our virtual choir and baby quilt projects, and all that has sustained our connection throughout this time of separation. We have truly been a beacon to one another in a time of confusion and fear. Things will not be exactly the same ever again, but we celebrate those things that we have learned and the ways that we have grown in the face of all these challenges. I invite you now to share in the chat where your chalice of gratitude and anticipation is lighted this morning.
Let your body learn to bend, and like a will Let it be a dance, let it be a dance, let it be a dance. A child is born, the old must die. A time for joy, a time to cry. Take it as it passes by. Let it be a dance. Morning star comes out at night. Without the dark there is no light. If nothing's wrong, then nothing's right. Let it be a dance. Let it be a dance. Let it be a dance. Let the sunshine, let it rain. Share the laughter, bear the pain. And round we go again. Let it be a dance. Let it be a dance we do. May I have this dance with you. Through the good times and the bad times too. Let it be a dance.
Hello, my church family and friends. The one thing I don't like doing as a member of the board is this. I don't like doing my turn at asking for money. And today, when I realized I had to do it without a lot of time to think about it, mine was scheduled down the road a bit, but we needed to get it in quickly because of the need to get everything edited. I thought about, why do I hate to do this so much? And part of it's obvious, of course. It's about money. Who likes to ask for money? I don't think any of us do. But why is it that big a deal for me? Because I know the church does good things. I know the money goes to places that I absolutely support. So I looked inside and I realized all my life, all I knew about churches and money was that they always asked for more, that you had to give a certain amount. If you didn't, you were not considered a member in good standing. But the truth of this is, I really don't know the truth of any of that because I didn't grow up in a church. I didn't grow up in a situation at all where tithing was a part of it. But I had many friends that did, and I grew up in the town that is the world headquarters for a couple churches. So a lot of my friends were involved in that. So I understood what it was all about. And I also knew that those churches bought up thousands of acres. They got millions of dollars bequeathed to them. And I didn't see them doing anything good. But that's not how I feel about All Souls. I don't see anything that All Souls does that I don't support 100%. I gladly and cheerfully give All Souls money because I know it's going to go into supporting things that I feel are useful, I feel that are good, that I feel help our community, help our members, that are just absolutely positives, and will do things that with the money that I give that I might not necessarily have the wherewithal to do on my own. And just everything about All Souls. We try very hard to always be on the right side of history, to promote causes and people and support the things that matter, the things that can really make a difference in lives. So with that in mind, I'm going to ask you for some money. Whatever's comfortable, whatever you can give, because we all know we wouldn't be watching this, we wouldn't be participating in this if we didn't support All Souls and all the amazing work it does. So if you can, if you are able, give as you can, and it will be gratefully, gratefully received. Thank you.
Let's say together the words of dedication for our offering. We dedicate our offerings and our actions to the mission at the heart of this congregation, to build a respectful, caring community, to inspire personal and spiritual growth, and to create change toward a just and compassionate society.
Douglas Steer, a Quaker teacher, says that the ancient question, "Who am I?" inevitably leads to a deeper one, "Whose am I?" Because there is no identity outside of relationship. You can't be a person by yourself. To ask, "Whose am I?" is to extend the question far beyond the little self-absorbed self and wonder, who needs you? Who loves you? To whom are you accountable? To whom do you answer? Whose life is altered by your choices? With whose life, whose lives is your own all bound up inextricably in obvious or invisible ways?
From Promises and Promise by Reverend Linda Hansen. We can make caring out of indifference, abundance out of scarcity, and community out of strangers. We can learn to see that we're all in this world together and that we can make it together or not at all. This is the power, the promise of religious community. What we ask of one another explicitly is that we come to services, to congregational meetings, even to social events, and that we make that a priority. We ask one another to pledge financial support because almost all of the money that pays the bills and pays the staff and supports the programs comes from us. We ask one another to give our time and talent to the many tasks that keep the church functioning. We ask one another to share openly and honestly our opinions and listen respectfully to others, even to be open to be changed by one another. We ask one another for support even in the midst of disagreement. These are the kinds of promises we ask of members. But underneath it all is the promise, the hope that we too will experience glimpses of the miracle of human community and human care.
I suppose I've been learning about the practice of covenant, the how and why of it, for a long time without even realizing it. Not on purpose, it just seems to have happened that way. I know something about the greater history of it from my legal education. The church I joined when I discovered this faith tradition had no covenant when I joined, and I participated in the formulation of a covenant there. When I came to All Souls, I entered into a long-standing covenant that I regard as wise and well stated. So I've had varied experience with the idea, and I'm still learning. The reason that I think it's helpful to talk about the history and usage of the practice of covenant is that it was within the context of the early usage that it gained the meaning and accrued the practices and traditions that serve us when we practice it as congregants now. I have learned that to covenant is an old and deeply human practice. But why do we do it? And how does it help us practice our faith tradition in today's world? The word covenant is an old French verb that first appeared way back in the 13th century. It meant literally to come together, not just to agree, but to be united by an agreement. Not long after, when the word came into the English language, it was almost exclusively applied to granting rights to the use of land. In those days, they didn't think about land as something you could own the way we do now. The king didn't buy it, he seized it and held it by force of arms, and he wasn't about to sell any of it. But the people needed it for raising crops and livestock or living on it, so people thought in terms of the right to use and occupy it for as long as they could arrange it. The king delegated the use and occupancy of it in layers down to those who managed the use of it, which was mostly farming. People were well aware that the land was far more permanent than any of them were, and that the land was, after all, the necessary basis for all life. So there was a very high regard for land and for good faith in dealings with land. The agreements those dealings produced were called covenants, and they were understandably very important and solemn. For the people who farmed or managed the farming, the idea was to get the right to occupy the land for a predictable time in order to plant crops, care for them, and harvest them later in the year. With a longer term, they could raise and domesticate livestock, even breed better animals. With a long enough period, they could clear more trees and boulders, put up barns, grain bins, and more permanent homes for families. As time passed, the agreements were more commonly written, but literacy was not widespread, so there was a lot of trust involved, that people wouldn't cheat each other, that they would live up to their agreements, and so on. And it was very necessary that people be honorable about it. There were also oaths exchanged of fealty, loyalty, and protection as part of the covenants. Eventually, many of the agreements became hereditary, intergenerational on both sides. In such cases, the parties on one side expected and agreed that the covenants would be extended to their own descendants and to those of the parties on the other side. They relied on each other for specific personal performance. If you were promised a certain parcel of land, you had a right to that parcel and you couldn't be moved somewhere else. You agreed to be personally responsible for the productive use of it, and you couldn't substitute someone else to be responsible for it. If you guaranteed protection to a tenant or a group of tenants, you were held to personal responsibility. For many reasons, including the personal, long-term nature of the covenants, in the event of a violation or breach, the parties were expected to meet, resolve their differences, restore the covenant to full function, and continue as before. Covenants were the high points of human trust, commitment, and promise. Few words in the English language at that time matched the importance, significance, and gravitas of the word covenant. It's no big stretch to understand why, When the Bible was translated into English at about this same time, the word covenant was used to describe the connection between the God of the Bible and the chosen people described in the Bible. Eventually, in the 16th and 17th centuries, when new emerging faith traditions became centered on the bonds between church congregations and congregants, they came to use the term covenant to describe those relationships as well. In the congregation where I was formerly a member, there was never any mention of a covenant, and I hadn't heard of the practice until we went into a ministerial search and retained an interim minister, Reverend Marlene. She strongly encouraged us to compose one. She pointed out to us that churches organized around a creed used their belief traditions, their creed, to form congregational bonds. Non-creedal, free churches form their bonds directly by congregational covenants. In fact, she taught us it is the congregational covenant that enables us to bond as a congregation while remaining free of the constraints of doctrine and dogma. In a very real way, our congregational covenants enable us to be who we are. Congregational covenants retain and benefit from the traditional characteristics of the early covenants. They're hereditary, not by birthright or bloodline, but by choice, commitment, and common faith. By willingly committing to our covenant, you and I have received it from people we've never met and whose names we don't know. We've covenanted with Ted and Gerald and others who are gone now. And now we covenant with Russ and Andrea and Travis and Victor, who've committed to it since. When we're gone, they'll covenant with other generations yet to come, who will inherit the covenant from us. Our covenant has been part of our congregational heritage since it was proposed by Minister Lester Mondale and approved by the congregation in 1939. And the bond of our covenant is plenary, not just across time, but across the whole present congregation. We don't pick and choose among individuals. We covenant with every member of the congregation. Your particular covenant with others is actually based on your understanding that they also have accepted the covenant, and that's what's really important. And it's all that's necessary. If that's all you know about them, if it's the most of what you have in common with them, it's enough. Covenant is not an event that happens to us the first time we recite it. It's a verb, a process we perform patiently and persistently with others over time. The strength of our covenant with other individuals will vary from time to time because it truly rests on the strength of our mutual acceptance of the covenant, and it's the mutuality that matters. As long as each of us accepts the covenant, it will be present between us to some extent, in some strength, and always greater in its potential strength. Like the earliest covenants, ours is intended, presumed, to be healed and restored if it's breached. This is the characteristic that reminds me that of all agreements, covenants invoke the highest level of commitment. For example, we agree to live in peace together. If a disagreement turns to lasting anger, if someone gets mad at me and holds a grudge, my duties to them are not released. It's still up to me to perform my part of the covenant with them to the extent that circumstances allow, until the covenant can be restored to full function between us. If you find yourself in that situation, the church has a procedure that may help. You can contact Reverend Kendyl or a member of the Committee on Ministry, and they can get you started back toward better relations. Our whole congregation benefits if we make a strong covenant bond a living part of our church culture. This facet of covenant, that it will be healed and restored, is the one that makes the bond a secure commitment that says, we're in this together. This idea that we have a covenant to create a bond because we don't choose to follow a creed someone else has presented to us may be a short answer to the why question, but for some it may only beg the greater question. Why do we want a bond anyway? What difference will it make to us? One place I find the answer to that question is in the contents of our own covenant. I know how the structure and substance of our covenant comes to me, and I offer it now without suggesting that it's right for anyone else. It's just how I see it. I read the outer two phrases, to dwell together in peace and to help one another, as setting the stage, creating a protective space for the core provision, the centerpiece, to seek the truth in love. The outer two are akin to one another and have some overlap. It was Ralph Waldo Emerson who said that the only way to have a friend is to be one. To me, that means to take the first step in dwelling in peace, not to be passive, not to wait for the other person, but to extend my hand in friendship. Helping one another happens both within the context of the church and outside, person to person. It might mean joining a committee, making a pledge, working in the churchyard, or setting up for the auction. But it also might mean helping someone who's having a problem with a computer printer or needs help to clean up some branches after a windstorm. These are all parts of the bond, pieces that we assemble, supports that we create for ourselves, for other members, and for the church as a whole, repeatedly over time. But don't worry if you can't do a lot of those things. I suggest you do as much as your own life allows and be satisfied with that. Other times and other opportunities will come along. For me, the why of our covenant, the reason we bond, really comes out in the core statement, to seek the truth in love. I don't claim to pronounce what the search for truth is or ought to be, other than to note that it is clearly the most personal in nature of the three provisions. But I'm willing to venture a few words about what it is not. It is not dispassionate. It is not without mystery and discovery. It is not drawn from just one or two sources, and it is not just an abstract philosophical discussion. But above all, it is not a solo enterprise. I suggest that in our covenant is the acknowledgement that our best, most satisfying, and likely most useful search will be accomplished with the support and encouragement of people we care about and respect and from whom we can learn. We believe, and we repeat it often to one another, that it isn't necessary that whatever truth you find in the course of your search is the same as the truth I discover in the course of mine. The real point is the support, encouragement, human caring, and learning in the search. It follows then for me that the why of our covenant, the purpose of the bond of our covenant, is that it helps each of us and all of us to become part of something greater than ourselves. Our covenant covers the subject well, and it's short. We're in the practice of reaffirming it to each other often, and I hope we always do.
Now let's join together in speaking once again our covenant promises to this community. Together we affirm,
goodwill is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another.
The greatest temptation we face in this age of self-sufficiency is the temptation to disregard our utter dependence on the people and world around us. We think our purpose and destiny are independent of others. There is a tendency to compare our possessions and accomplishments with theirs and resent what they have achieved and we have not. We disregard our dependence. Gratitude reminds us how utterly dependent we are on the people and world around us and obligates us to nurture the world that nurtures us in return, to foster the kind of environment that we want to take in and therefore become. The purpose of religion, which means to bind together, is to help us find our place as human beings within the universe. Religion can unite the purpose and meaning in our lives.
May a song of peace be yours. May a song of hope be mine. May a song of love be ours until we meet again.
Thank you, John, for that very thoughtful message. And thanks to all of you for being with us this morning. We invite you to join us now for a few moments of informal conversation in our Zoom connection, after which we will call to order our annual congregational meeting. You can find that link in the chat here or on our All Souls website homepage. We also hope to see you next Sunday when we will consider what constitutes spiritual junk food and how we can choose to nourish our inner life wisely. Until then, please, everyone, urge your friends to complete their vaccinations. Take care, stay safe, and be well this week.